When most people think about The Last of Us, it's a world consumed by our worst fears. The probability of returning to the harsh existence of survival, the cold calculating rules of nature. The Last of Us depicts the face of the apocalypse, consumed by a fungal pandemic that within a few months of the global collapse, following the initial devastation, the overall global population loss reached up to 90%. The initial cordyceps brain infection outbreak killed or infected many.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you.
These so-called monsters we are amongst are actually just a reflection of our former selves, or vessels, dead from within and outside. And on the surface the infected appear horrific, no longer acting on rationality or capable thought, anything but human, but the will of the fungus. The outbreak has ultimately driven humanity into the brink of near extinction in the world of The Last of Us. This is shown within the environments. The world is overgrown and unkept. Signs of humanity's need to tame nature, ultimately to be at its mercy once again. Untamable and unforgivable. In this post-apocalyptic event, societies and laws that govern it decay. Years of civilization and innovation all come to a complete halt almost overnight. Once again, humanity becomes thrown into the harsh reality of nature to endure and survive, as Ellie explains, rather than live and prosper as we once did.
The edge of the universe and back. Endure and survive.
Excuse me?
Savage Starlight. That comic I've been reading? That's what the hero says after a big battle.
Endure and survive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Humanity in The Last of Us tried to escape their own catalyst, but was ultimately thrown into the harsh reality it pretended didn't exist. The world of The Last of Us would have you believe in its central theme of the infected as well as the fungus itself is to blame the destruction of humanity, that the monstrous horde consumed by the fungus has lost any sense of what we call morality or empathy, yet I argue the real monsters was us the entire time. The irony is that the cordyceps fungus doesn't merely destroy humanity, but that it exposes it for what it really is. It peels the layer off this misconception, this false reality in which we've created. The infected become creatures driven entirely by instinct, yet as society deteriorates, many human survivors begin operating under the exact same principles. The hunters, for example, murder for resources, and David's community consumes others to survive, eating literal people. The WLF and the Serpent Heights become trapped in an endless cycle of tribal warfare. Joel murders to protect his own, and Abby destroys herself pursuing revenge. Ellie follows the same path. The brilliant irony is that just as the fungus takes over the mind of the infected, fear and survival also takes over the mind of the presently aware. The result is often indistinguishable. It's that the infected never choose what they become, yet humanity does.
It's me.
He tried to...
Oh, baby girl. It's okay. It's okay.
Oh.
It's okay.
And yet, many of them willingly descend into brutality that rivals the monsters they fear. They further create the nightmare they choose to live in. Modern civilization is the cornerstone in human history. Historic periods of revolutionary advancements that led us to a more comfortable way of surviving. For thousands of years, humanity has gradually insulated itself from nature. We created infrastructure, have governments and food chains, entertainment. Humans found a new purpose outside of just existing under the umbrella of nature's will. All of the systems have become integrated into our way of life for generations. So much so, dare I say, that many of us have forgotten what it means to actually survive in the face of true disaster. When modern society caters to us so seamlessly to our everyday wants and needs, it becomes a part of everyday life. But something like the outbreak destroys that illusion almost overnight. Constructs of ideas, philosophies, and law and order, everything we culturally understand about a world in which we try to shape, means nothing anymore. And the world of The Last of Us depicts this wonderfully. The world is forced to go back to its roots. The blossoms have decayed and weathered. Humanity is no longer ripe and fruitful as it once was. It's rotten to the core. Suddenly, humanity is fighting the same battles it fought thousands of years ago. In the world of The Last of Us shows us when all these systems collapse, the worst of humanity unfolds, or for a more nuanced perspective, our true nature at work.
Just give me a couple.
Who has our guns?
Profoundly, all the systems of trust, of humans working collectively, disappears. Instead, tribalistic groups form from within differing ideologies, since the governing understood rules and laws no longer matter when the things that enforce humans' worst traits is no longer there to suppress them. Therefore, chaos can easily erupt without consequences. We see a free open trade society unfold, since currency is no longer valuable, only resources, and naturally food becomes very scarce like anything else. The food transportation and farm systems are obviously non-operational, meaning the demand for food has become more savage. Walking through the streets we see people selling rodents and even animals we would once consider pets. This is the levels of desperation and depravity in the world of which The Last of Us presents. That shows many necessities are hard to come by, that many are willing to die for the things that once came so easily. Society, by default, has drifted from community and sustainability all the way to individualism and exploitation. So much so that we see humans feasting on each other, the sheer desperation or hunting for the uncertain probability of the next meal. Such is the consumption of the world of The Last of Us. It becomes obtruse that civilization was never as permanent as we'd like to believe, but rather a temporary fantasy caught within our arrogance, the blissfully unaware reality that it all could come easily crashing down at any time, and maybe we're not ready for that. The cordyceps that plagues the entire game is a living organism like anything else, that shares the same space as humanity, yet like any other organism is trying to survive. It cannot objectively be what we would consider an evil. From a biological perspective, the fungus is just simply doing what life has always done or allowed. Without question, it isn't defined by what's right or wrong, just what is. To consume and adapt and expand and ultimately survive, which is no different from humanity itself. We, metaphorically, are the fungus, just slightly operating outside of instinct. We spread across the globe much like the fungus spreads throughout hosts. The infected become a distorted reflection of humanity's own evolutionary success. Humans have long dominated the ecosystem, species go extinct because of us, and in this way of looking at things is just nature running its course. Nothing can truly determine the most dominant organism on the planet. Humans could be the next in line for something that may surpass our understanding altogether, even if something not as complex as ourselves is capable of domination in the right circumstances. In The Last of Us, remnants of humanity barely cling to life of what once was, eerily reflected back as almost as a tormentor to the survivors, a ghostly reminder that maybe time has truly run out. And just like the broken buildings, the remaining parts of human life is hanging on by a thread. Humans have now become the endangered species. Yet, the brilliance of The Last of Us shows a character named Tommy, for example, who acts out of the instinctual need to survive and pass on what traces of human life to the next generation. despite this cataclysmic change, in finding like-minded people who collectively strive to keep whatever traces of life possible, adapting to this new change. All whilst remembering the very ideals that allows a new civilization to thrive. The infected become essentially a roadblock, a part of the current existing world that, just like any other organism, needs to learn to adapt or die in new surroundings. The separation that allowed humans to remain atop of the ecosystem for so long is what sets us apart from every other species. The ability of logical, capable understanding of our existence than just natural instincts alone. But ultimately, it's the will to survive.
I struggled for a long time with surviving. And no matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
What becomes of the infected, The Last of Us shows us, may be a fate no worse than living. The separation is very much the same, but closely aligned. Humanity was already destructive long before clickers and bloaters came on the scene. Yet the infected, once regular people, are nothing more than a hollow shell, that from within the soul no longer resides. It is fitting for the term of the walking dead, no longer human, but a freakish transformation into something incapable of anything rational beneath the horror. The infected are no longer acting on choice. They don't even create tribes, borders, or enemies. They simply do what the fungus demands of them. Humanity, on the other hand, has always had a choice. The Last of Us hauntingly takes the audience down a path of slow decay, of empathy, where in this world, where the people still capable of making choices often commit acts far worse than the creatures that have lost the ability to choose at all. Effectively, the infected may have destroyed civilization, but humanity may not have been far behind anyway. All the fungus did was speed up the process of our own self-destructive tendencies. In this world, there isn't many who align with Tommy's views that collectively wishes to restore humanity back to stability. Every major group in the series becomes trapped by a singular obsession. Just as the fungus consumes the minds of the infected, trauma consumes the minds of the survivors to survive. These forms of tribalism keeps people divided, ironically like the fungus that works in tandem to ensure absolute survival. The same cannot be said about humanity, who whilst preserves itself cannot seem to join hands in restoring itself, and whatever remains of the government in this crisis, who are most certainly keeping underground, enforces Federa, a fictionalized version of a real-life federal agency connected to the real world, FEMA. These apocalypse gatekeepers become a part of this sickness, so much so that life becomes a totalitarian nightmare, who because of their inhumane ways, such as public executions of dissidents and occasional massacres to prevent overcrowding, none are better than the infected, if not worse.
Get a life one.
No, I'm not infected.
Hold her down.
This can's wrong.
Do it.
Please.
Eyes forward. All right. She's down.
Holy shit!
Naturally, they come under resistance from the Fireflies, who, just like Federa, believe they're striving for a righteous cause, the benefits of humanity. Whilst they started as freedom fighters, their desperation to defeat Federa and find a cure led them to mirror the very tyranny they were fighting. By bombing public civilian areas and crowded checkpoints in quarantine zones, regularly killing innocents along the way. Unlike Tommy's fair society, there's no trials or fair justice is given if anyone is suspected to be against their values. The same applies to the hunters, who are caught in this so-called idealistic race to dominate the space. Something profoundly telling and concerning about humanity, that when disaster strikes, something like that of Bethesda's Fallout series depicts as well, a world that is consumed by disaster and the dog vs. dog world. It is ultimately the desperation for survival. Like everyone else, the hunters are caught inside this power struggle. They become the scavengers to the spoils of resources, and the predators who systematically murder any outsider, man, woman or child, who enters their territory just to steal their shoes, clothes and canned food, by systematically using their intelligence to deceive people.
Well, what about the guy?
He ain't even hurt.
In these forms of primitivity, religious cults and belief systems emerged, aligned with destructive measures only something Charles Manson could create. Such as the Seraphites, the extremist faction, that while self-sufficient, their extreme fanaticism aligns not too far from everyone else. They hunt down and kill any member who questions their beliefs and ways. Just as the Wolves, a paramilitary faction, who built a thriving, high-functioning society with self-sufficient infrastructure, yet they operate under a strict kill-on-sight policy for any outsider entering Seattle, regardless of whenever the person is hostile. Humanity in The Last of Us is heavily divided. The chances of survival are very slim, but not necessarily from the infected who roam without cause, but instead tribes who are consciously aware. And just as brutal, the irony is that the fungus didn't create the monsters, it simply exposed them. It was us the entire time, long before the infection destroyed civilization. In this survival of the fittest, characters like Ellie and Joel have to adapt to this change that inevitably makes them become just as ruthless just to survive. It is the death of humanity, not just physically but morally, that shapes their perceptions of the world they navigate. Joel is in polar opposite to his brother, who is hopeful for the future. Whatever faith he had in humanity is clearly diminished, as his whole life was torn apart when his daughter was murdered for no just cause. The opening of The Last of Us speaks for itself long before the infected plagued the streets, only to follow years later a sense of hopelessness in a bleak existence with no meaning. That it's until both Ellie and Joel find each other, a whole new dynamic unfolds. Joel once again finds meaning in a life that may as well not have any meaning in his world. Little echoes of humanity beautifully shine through, and once again Joel takes on a parental figure, and Ellie by proxy becomes like a daughter. And over time this bond forms something rarely seen in such a cold setting. The Last of Us really hones in the point with Ellie and Joel that even beyond this disaster, that human beings can still find some happiness, and hope does exist, even if it is very temporary.
Is everything you were hoping for?
It's got its ups and downs, but you can't deny the view, though.
We allow these thought mechanisms to drive our survival in ways that keeps us alive. Yet, what's fascinating is that Joel doesn't see himself as a monster. Neither does the player. Of course, we sympathise with him because we understand why he became who he is. And throughout the game, as we see, Joel kills countless people. Of course, you may say some deserve it and some arguably don't. Yet the player rarely questions it because we're emotionally attached to his perspective. The Last of Us allows us to become attached to these characters as if we are there with them on this journey. The same way that Joel becomes consumed by protecting Ellie, the player becomes consumed by protecting her too. It becomes more than an obligation, but rather a deep-rooted connection. The beautiful side of humanity. But also the harsh reality continues to betray a side of humanity that wishes to connect. And the perfect example is when Joel and Ellie meet Henry and Sam. Naturally at first both are hostile, but something human unfolds that shows why civilization, while still destructive, is capable of living in harmony. They develop some sense of care for each other, but yet when thrown into survival, instincts naturally come into play, for the human will to live and protect its own. By the end, Joel's deed to save Ellie in the hospital is a human act far more nuanced and brilliantly layered. Something that calls back to when his own daughter died. He can't possibly lose what traumatized him. Humanity is not important enough for Joel to allow Ellie to die, and he won't allow humanity to take something that he is connected to serve as a sacrifice, one that could heal and prevent any more infected. Yet even if that was the outcome at the end of the game, society would still be torn apart. The devastating nature of the fungal outbreak is a reset that humanity could almost certainly be stuck in the Dark Ages. Yet humanity is keeping itself there. Just as the fungus consumes the mind, even those who aren't infected are trapped by forces greater than themselves emotionally. The sad reality is that most of these characters become consumed by the fungus themselves, and they don't even need to be infected. I argue that they live a fate much worse than death. The fungus systematically caused the downfall of our own entire ecosystems, and with it brought a hellish landscape. Hell are other people. These famines and pestilence and distrust between an entire population, the fate of humanity hangs in the balance without complete harmony, and is driven by chaos. The story doesn't argue that humanity itself is inherently evil, that it is complicated, that it is capable of extraordinary compassion and extraordinary evil and cruelty, often within the same person, if survival wills it. Just as the infected lost their humanity because of a fungus growing inside of them, the world risks losing its humanity of what grows inside itself. And that may be the most unsettling idea at the heart of the entire story. That by the end of the world didn't reveal a species united by a common threat. Instead, it revealed a species struggling against its own nature. The fungus simply brought that reality into effect and forced humanity to look at what had been there the entire time. That we were already sick and infected to begin with, and once civilization fell apart, it revealed something profoundly dark and honest about people when needing to survive. Maybe we were the monsters all along.